gentlemen, and welcome back to a long overdue return to the Hyborian Age, accompanied by our favorite Cimmerian barbarian. We are looking at today number 4 in the series of Glénat, bande dessinée, Conan the Barbarian adaptations of the original Howard Tales. This one is done entirely by one person. The first for the series by Robin Recht. It is The Frost Giant's Daughter. So this one has some very interesting publication history to it. The original story by Howard was submitted to Weird Tales at the same time as the very first Conan story, The Phoenix on the Sword. And unlike that one, which after a few revisions was eventually published, and from there on becomes history, this one was not. It was rejected by Farnsworth Wright for very reason. It was a bit too sexy, is the general consensus as to why. And we'll see later throughout as we discuss it why. Howard eventually did have it published under a different name with a different main character as the Gods of the North in 1934 in the March issue of a fanzine called the Fantasy Fan, one of the very first fanzines of its type. The original unaltered version would only see print in 1976 although there was another version in 1950s that was published, but that one had been rewritten from top to bottom by L. Sprague de Camp, so doesn't count. Since then, you can find the original version really easily in different collections and such. And it's an interesting story, not just in terms of that, but also in terms of its inspirations. Unlike other Conan tales and other Howardian tales of that type, which are very much inspired by, say, history or life in his experiences in life. This one is very much inspired by mythology. He'd gone through a book of comparative mythology by Bullfinch, I think his name is, and had focused a bit, for this one at least, on the myths of Atalanta and Apollo and Daphne, especially that last one. For those who don't know, Apollo and Daphne is the myth that involves a chase between the god Apollo chasing after the mortal nymph Daphne with intent to, consummate his love without her intentions, if you know what I mean. Basically, Apollo gets into a fight with Eros, aka Cupid, over his use of a bow and arrow, which he finds a little bit, insulting because he's the patron god of archery. What the hell? This is my shtick. Eros gets a bit miffed and shoots Apollo with one of his lust arrows and shoots this chick Daphne with a leaden arrow that makes her completely disgusted with Apollo. So when they run into each other, well, you can guess what happens. So Apollo makes chase. Daphne runs away as fast as she can, eventually calling upon her divine father to, save her, and she transforms into a laurel tree, which Apollo, still in love with her, declares that he will forever, decorate his hair with the laurel, which is why Apollo wears a laurel wreath and uses laurel for his lyre, and that's, the usual kind of weird Greek myth kind of stuff. So here we have a variation on that theme. Instead of the god chasing a mortal, it's the mortal chasing a goddess, and in this case, there's nobody, the only person inspiring lust here isn't Eros, it's the goddess herself, as we'll see. So that's for the actual mythology thing. This story has had a couple of different adaptations over the years, both by Marvel during the Savage Sword and Conan the Barbarian, the original 70s comics, done by Roy Thomas, as well as Dark Horse, of course, doing their own version when they had the rights to the character. So, as I said before, Robin Recht is the guy doing the art and the writing on this one. This is not his first rodeo, though. He's been doing BD work since 2002. Medieval fantasy kind of, settings and such, so perfectly adapted for this kind of stuff. He's also done the first 3 albums of this series right here, the Glénat Elric adaptation from the character by Michael Moorcock. Highly recommend this one, too. This is really, really, really good. If you like Conan, you're going to like Elric. It's almost guaranteed, especially because this one is an excellent adaptation. Even Michael Moorcock here, the best Elric adaptation ever made. That's a stamp of approval right there. When the author of the character tells you that you did good, you know you did good. Anyway, back to Conan. So, one of the things you notice here about the artwork in general is that, A, it is very well done. As has been, the case so far. They haven't skimped on the quality when it comes to these. I like a lot of the effects work. You see a lot of effects works on the snow is very much like, sometimes the snow just feels like painted on when it's, being blown in the wind, especially like right here on page 13, the first one you first get to see Atali. here with her brothers. We'll get to why her brothers are polar bears. Also, it should probably be mentioned, she is going to be naked throughout this entire thing, except for a very extraordinarily diaphanous piece of silk around her loins, so be prepared for that. But yeah, the effects of the snow and, the blood on snow especially, I find very, very, very well done throughout this entire album. Also, I like if we look here at page 8, this forest on the first panel here, the darkness of the pine trees combined with the snow and the gray sky, it's very, very beautifully done images. Speaking of images, though, the very first image here that we'll see is very much an indication of what we're looking for. There are a lot of big splash page, 2-page spreads throughout this thing. You have one here at page 4 where the very first page of the entire album here, close up on Atali's eyes with, you're not sure whether it's snow or if like stars just, being superimposed with the image of her with her hair flying all over the place and just her eyes. It's a very striking image to start the thing off, and it does give the indication that she is, in many ways, the viewpoint character throughout this entire story, which is a slight departure from the original Conan tale where, he's very much from his perspective. But here we get a bit more from her, and we get a bit more of her motivation, of her feeling on the whole situation, and, what she wants out of it. And it does go a long way to, how should I put this? This story has had some controversy simply due to the fact that you have a guy a big, strong, manly, guy chasing after a naked young woman in the middle of the wilderness with intent to have sex with her without necessarily her consent. Let's face facts. That is, an easily made interpretation of this whole thing. I mean, this is, however, counteracted by a couple of things. One, she's a goddess who is deliberately inspiring supernatural levels of lust in immortals in order to lure them to her father's altar and kill them. So, yeah, that is her whole shtick, and it's made very clear from the get-go that A, she gets off on the bloodshed and carnage that she's surrounded by, and 2, she is very deliberately egging people on to, get them killed. So, definitely no mistaking her for a hero in this situation. I'm especially thinking of page 14, which is another example of really great artwork. Atali is looking down upon a battle between the Vanir and the Aesir. For those who don't know, the northern people of the Hyborian Age are essentially the mythical predecessors to what would eventually become the gods of the Norse pantheon. Basically, the Norse pantheon being a foggy recollection of an ancient peoples and their constant warfare and such. In this case, this battle is depicted as black silhouettes in a just sea of red and blood. And it's hard to tell. Again, this is something like the confusion a little bit to the visual kind of metaphor. You can see that the little dots all over the place is probably snow, but it looks like splatters of blood under this vision, and especially in the lower panel there. And throughout it, you have Atali's narration here. As she says, she feels them down the valley. From where they are no Aesirs or Vanir, just mortals who hate each other, who kill each other. I love it. Yeah, she's got some serious bloodlust in every sense of the term. And, throughout this, you get that sense throughout of this battle happening. And then you introduce Conan. And the cool thing here is that he's depicted looking like Frazetta's death dealer with that horned helmet. He's described in the original story as wearing a horned helmet. Yes, I know Vikings didn't really wear horned helmets. Shut up, it's not important. But the way that horned helmet is described with the downward curling horns is very much like Frazetta's death dealer, which is damn cool little reference there. Of course, he takes off his helmet in order to introduce himself to this other guy here, Heimdall, who he's about to have this final duel with. And yeah, the whole thing just looks absolutely gorgeous. That sense of, blood and snow, red and white and black. Those are the three main colors, as well as, like dark blues from ice and, skies and stuff like that. And that very much shows those kinds of colors. And all throughout it, you have Atali there, just this young woman, I will say she does look a bit young, but that's probably more to do with her size contrast with Conan than anything else, to be frank. And you get that, contrast. She like stands out in every image she's in compared to the background. So she really, you get that feeling of she doesn't belong there. Something is off. Aside from just the fact that she's walking around completely buck naked in the middle of the, northern extreme cold and snow, which is already kind of weird. But you definitely get that feeling that something's off with her. Especially when she's way, way too happy just hanging out around corpses. Throughout there, you also get when the night scenes. There's this nice, like, in the next couple of pages after this, you get, the purples coming in from the setting sun going over the snow. Again, lots of good attention to coloration. And there's also, as I said, those larger splash pages, such as page 34, 35, to indicate both the passage of time, but it also gives an indication of the landscape, the scope of this place. This story has its very mythological feel, not just in terms of just the events happening, but also in terms of here how it's shown. There's a lot of focus both on the landscape and the colors and such that really gives it that extra large view, even when the entire situation is just between two people, essentially. There's also, depictions of these great, like here on page 38 and 39 here, just this peak of snow and rock that Conan catches up with a tally there. And it looks great, the detail work on this stuff. And of course, once you get to the ending, once you get, say, to the point where, like in the myth, the Atali calls upon her father to save her because she drastically underestimated Conan's will to live. And then all of a sudden, you go from regular comic book panels to full page, just incredible images as Ymir, the frost giant, just emerges from the ether. This huge, muscled body with no head, because, his sons had, cut off his head and from there made the world, essentially. That's, classic mythology right there. And he looks like if a volcano had just risen up with, and it's just glorious. Like, you get a good shot here on page 62, and the blood coming off his severed neck is just like a volcano going off, and Conan just raging at him, and eventually, next page, leaping off to confront this god. And just the primal scream there in the background that he's leading out, that covers most, like a third of the page, which then gets drowned out in what looks like, the blood kind of coming off of the Ymir. And it's just like, that's a striking image with the lightning coming down on all sides. Only for the next page to switch back to that landscape with maybe just a hint of the events in the distance. It kind of gives the idea that there's more of the world out there than just that, and that this is just a small bit, no matter how incredible and apocalyptic the events are, it's just one part of a larger landscape. And then from there, Conan returns back to the, mortal world as it is, waking up. And the, panels are back to normal with those same kind of, regular, combination of colors, only to reveal that he's not a dream because he's still got Atali's silk garment still in his hand there. Which is, nice little, touch. It's very much that, oh, you were just dreaming. Oh, yeah, how did I get this? Kind of thing. There's some interesting things there. Another interesting thing here, as Atali is about to sacrifice Conan, he seemingly has like a heart attack. She's like, reaches out and is like, yes, you will give me your heart. And he's like, oh, and just, collapses to the ground. And you hear that tum-tum, tum-tum, tum-tum of his heartbeat that was referenced earlier. And then he won't give up. He starts getting back up, and the tum-tum, tum-tum, tum-tum of the, the visual, onomatopoeia there on the page just gets more and more insistent, bigger and bigger. And then as he gets up and starts fighting her brothers, it covers the page. You see him there's almost nothing else. There's almost no other sounds except for him screaming. And by the page 56 there, the page is covered in his heartbeat. His will to live is on full display there. And just, carves into her two frost giant brothers, which for some reason are polar bears. This is something I don't really know why this is like this. I mean, it works because in the original story, the two frost giants that accompany Italia at this point don't have any speaking lines. They're just, they're her muscle, so to speak. Here, the fact that they're polar bears, the size of like double-decker buses, is one, pretty cool. Let's face facts. And for some reason they have like, I don't know what the hell you call these, like weird, like gigantic tusks attached to themselves. I don't know if these are like weapons or armor or something like that, but it's a cool image. It's definitely striking, that's for sure. And it doesn't change anything to the actual events. There is actually one other area here, in terms of the adaptation itself here, that is slightly different. There is a point here as night falls where Conan, takes time to build a camp and, take some rest. And then Italia comes back, ends the chase, and just kind of like hangs out with him a little bit. Just to tempt him further, I suppose. And, he actually says to her, if you're as smart as you think you are, you won't be here by morning. Just gives her a chance to get away from him, because she knows that he's, lusting after her, and he knows that she is just, egging him on, and he's like, okay, I'm giving you a chance to walk away from this. If you're still here by morning, it's on, lady. And of course, by morning, she's still around, so then it goes on. But then, once he does catch up to her, she causes like a avalanche that drops him down into, under some freezing water, and the whole place is littered with corpses. Just dead warrior after dead frozen warrior down there. And who immediately come to life and immediately start to drag him down to the depths. This is like, and always like, you get the impression from her dialogue during this place that these are people who didn't live up to her expectations. They got close, but weren't good enough. And now they're just, drowned in, frozen water forever. Still wanting to get to her, saying that you don't deserve her, you're not the best, we will stop you from getting to her, you don't deserve her, you'll be damned as we are. And meanwhile, Italia is up there literally getting off on this. Yeah, she's kind of messed up. Yeah, she's made very clear throughout this whole thing that she has ulterior motives, and that she's getting off on the carnage and violence. She's definitely not the good guy in this one. So, there's some interesting adaptations to this. It remains faithful to the original story, but also makes just enough changes to make it work both in a visual medium and to lower some of the ickier interpretations. You get less of that because, since it's from her perspective throughout the entire time, there's less of the sense that she is just, a bystander to all this. She is the instigator of this entire series of events. And unfortunately for her, she picked a guy who was more than capable of keeping up with her in this case, instead of the usual people she finds who, well, you've seen the amount of corpses she leaves in her wake. So yeah, I can certainly see some people disliking this story simply because of the subject matter and stuff like that. And again, if you're not the kind of person who got into Conan for the naked ladies, this one's going to be a bit of trouble, because there is one throughout the entire, pretty much every single page, there is her completely naked on it. Like, I think there's only a dozen pages total where she isn't present. So she is a major character. Anyway, well, as you can imagine, because it's called The Frost Giant's Daughter. So if you're into, as usually, of course, you have in the back here the making of stuff, and as well as a number of extra artwork. All of it really, really nice. All of it, in this case, homages by Mathieu Loffet, if I'm not mistaken here. Yeah. So, this one is another recommendation for my part. Now, if you had problems with the original story and it wasn't your thing, well, obviously this one isn't going to change much of that. I can understand some people disliking the story for its subject matter, but if you have no problem with that. And if you like excellent artwork that does excellent use of colors, well written, yeah, this one's a keeper. So that has been The Frost Giant's Daughter, written by Robin Recht, from the story by Robert E. Howard. The next one of these is going to be the Scarlet Citadel, and that one I am going to have a couple of things to say about it. We'll get to it when I get to it. In any case, I've been Bastian, aka 07716. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop me a like, subscription, follow, share, all that stuff. I have no idea what the hell this stuff is. But in any case, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.